Pushpin disclaimer. This story is created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to actual persons, events, or situations is purely coincidental. This is a fictional narrative intended to inspire, move, and spark reflection. Viewer discretion is advised. I didn't plan on telling this story. Honestly, I've tried to bury it for months, convincing myself that if I just worked longer hours, kept busy, and kept my head down, the memory would fade. But it hasn't. It lingers, sharper at night, like a splinter I can't pull out. I met her in the most ordinary way. Nothing cinematic. No thunderstorm, no grand introduction. Just a quiet Tuesday afternoon at the bookstore where I worked part-time while finishing my degree. I was unpacking boxes of new arrivals, my hands dusty with cardboard, when she walked in. She didn't even look around like most people do when they enter. She moved with a kind of certainty, like she knew what she wanted before she crossed the threshold. Mid-40s, maybe, but it wasn't her age that struck me. It was the way she carried herself. Confident, measured, as if the world had tested her before and she'd come out the other side stronger. She asked about a book, a rare title on art history we didn't usually stock. I remember fumbling a little with the computer, trying to look more professional than I felt. She noticed. Of course she did. Her lips curved into this small, knowing smile. Not mocking, just aware. Like she could see right through me. That was the first time I felt it, the electricity. Not attraction, not yet. More like a shift in air pressure. A pause between two strangers that lasts a beat too long. She leaned slightly against the counter, not impatient, just present. I don't know why, but it unsettled me. Over the next weeks, she kept coming back. Always alone. Sometimes she bought something, sometimes she didn't. We talked about books, about travel, about the way the city never seems to sleep. Our conversations weren't long, but they stayed with me. I'd find myself replaying them while shelving, remembering the way she tilted her head when she listened, the way she laughed softly as if she wasn't used to laughing freely anymore. It wasn't until the 5th or 6th visit that I learned she was married. She said it casually, mentioned her husband's name while telling me about a trip they'd taken years ago. Something in her tone caught me. It wasn't bitterness exactly, but there was distance in it. Like she was describing a house she used to live in but no longer called home. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing, just nodded, sliding her receipt across the counter, our fingers brushing for the first time. Neither of us moved for a second longer than necessary. It was small, meaningless to anyone watching, but to me it felt like the air between us cracked open. After she left that day, I couldn't focus. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting her to come back, half dreading it. My coworker asked me twice if I was okay. I wasn't, because here's the truth. I knew something had shifted. She was no longer just another customer, no longer just a woman I exchanged pleasantries with over a counter. She was layered in a way that made me curious, dangerous in a way I didn't want to admit. I didn't realize it then, but that was the beginning. The beginning of the silence I would learn to read. The pauses that spoke louder than words. The glances I couldn't unsee. And it all started with one line she tossed casually over her shoulder as she walked out that evening. A line so ordinary, but one I've carried ever since. "You make this place feel less lonely." I didn't sleep that night. I still don't know why. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. But life has a way of folding people back into your days when you least expect it. A week after that night in the repair shop, she walked into the small bookstore where I sometimes helped out on weekends. I was stacking paperbacks when I felt the shift in the air. Like the room got quieter, though the chatter and soft jazz over the speakers hadn't stopped. She was at the counter, hair pulled back, her fingers running absent-mindedly over the edge of her tote bag. Her eyes scanned the shelves as though she were somewhere else entirely. Not hunting for a book, but maybe hiding in the idea of one. "Didn't know this was your spot?" I said, careful not to sound too surprised as I walked closer. She turned, her smile quick but faint. "Didn't know it was yours either." Her voice had that same low, steady tone, measured, never hurried. But there was something softer underneath it, something tired. She moved through the aisles slowly, as if buying time. I followed at a distance, pretending to rearrange books. The truth was, I couldn't stop watching the small details. Her fingers lingering too long on a spine, her shoulders tightening when someone brushed past, the way she stood still for a moment in front of the poetry section, like she'd forgotten how to move. "You read this?" she asked suddenly, holding up a slim volume with worn pages. I nodded. "Yeah, it's quiet. Kind of like it tells you secrets if you read slow enough." She tilted her head, studying me, and for a second I felt like I'd said too much. But then she looked down at the book again, tracing the corner of the cover with her thumb. "I used to read all the time," she said. "Now it feels like there's never space for it anymore." Her words hung there, heavier than she meant them to, I think. A confession wrapped in something casual. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to, but there was a wall in her tone, a careful guard. So instead, I just said, "Maybe space isn't something we wait for. Maybe it's something we steal." That made her laugh, short and sharp, almost surprised out of her. But when it faded, her eyes caught mine, and there was a flicker there, like she'd let herself slip for a second before remembering to pull back. We stood in silence, the kind that wasn't awkward, just charged. I watched her adjust the strap of her bag, her hands trembling just slightly before she tucked them into her pockets. She was too composed for it to be nerves. Felt more like something pressing down on her. "Anyway," she said finally, her voice steadier, "I should get going." I nodded, even though a part of me wanted to stop her. She started to walk away, then paused at the door, turning back just enough to say, almost like it wasn't meant for me, "You notice too much." And then she was gone, leaving the faintest trace of perfume in the air, and me standing in an aisle full of books I couldn't remember the names of. That line, those 4 words, played over and over in my head long after she left. Not an accusation, not quite a compliment, something else, something I couldn't name, but couldn't stop thinking about. It was raining that night, the kind that came down steady, not wild, but heavy enough to drown out everything else. The bookstore had closed early, and somehow it ended with just the 2 of us at the cafe across the street. She'd insisted on buying me dinner as thanks for always showing up in the strangest places. And I didn't argue. The place was nearly empty, just the hum of the fridge in the corner and the sound of rain against the windows. She sat across from me, pushing noodles around her plate more than eating. "You ever feel like you're living 2 lives at once?" she asked suddenly, eyes fixed on her fork. "One everyone thinks they see, and another no one's supposed to know about." I froze for a second. It wasn't just small talk. It was a door she'd cracked open, maybe without meaning to. "Yeah," I said quietly, "every day." She looked up then, and for the first time I saw something raw in her eyes. Not guarded, not rehearsed, just exposed, like she wanted me to understand something she couldn't say outright. The silence stretched. I noticed her hand on the table, fingers tapping restlessly, close enough that if I reached out just a little, I could cover them with mine. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "And what do you do with the second life?" Her laugh was soft, bitter. "You try not to let it bleed into the first. You try not to let anyone notice." I wanted to tell her I already noticed, that I'd been noticing since the moment we met. But before I could speak, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, and something shifted in her expression. Her mouth tightening, her shoulders stiffening. "Sorry?" she murmured, flipping it face down. But the moment had already cracked. I leaned back, giving her space, pretending it didn't matter even though my chest ached with words I couldn't say. The rain grew louder outside. She reached for her water, her hand brushing the edge of mine. So light it could have been an accident, but not so light that I didn't feel the jolt of it. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. And for one suspended second, I thought, this is it. This is the moment something shifts forever. But then the waiter came by with the check, and she slipped her hand back into her lap, as if nothing had happened. We left the cafe together, walking close under the awning, not speaking. The rain drummed all around us, a curtain we didn't step through. Something had almost happened. Almost. And somehow that almost felt louder than anything either of us could say. The storm hadn't let up. Hours later, the streets were still wet, glistening under the yellow lamps. She'd asked if I wanted to wait it out at her place. Only until it clears. I told myself it was nothing, just shelter. But the air between us said otherwise. Her apartment was neat in a way that felt defensive. Books stacked too perfectly, cushions fluffed, everything in its place. She poured wine, though neither of us touched it. We sat on opposite ends of her sofa, the silence heavy. I kept stealing glances, at her hair pulled loose from its bun, at the faint lines under her eyes, at the way she gripped her glass without sipping. Finally, she set it down with a thud. "This is insane." I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "What part?" "All of it." She looked at me then, not like she usually did, measured, careful, but like she was bracing for impact. "You shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have let you in." "People would?" She trailed off, shaking her head. "People don't have to know," I said, softer than I meant to. Her eyes narrowed, but not in anger, in something closer to fear. "That's not the point. The point is, what are we even doing?" The question hung in the room like smoke. I didn't answer. Couldn't. She leaned back, exhaling hard, almost like she was trying not to cry. I'd never seen her like that. Unguarded, undone. "I don't recognize myself anymore," she whispered. The words cut deeper than if she'd confessed anything else. Because it wasn't about me or us. It was about her unraveling in her own skin. I wanted to reach across the space, to anchor her somehow. But I didn't move. Instead, I sat there, feeling the weight of her confession settle between us. And for the first time I realized whatever this was, it wasn't harmless. It wasn't a game. It was breaking her. The storm had quieted by the time we finally spoke again. The city outside was dripping and hushed, a kind of pause in the world that felt like it belonged only to us. She hadn't moved closer, but she hadn't asked me to leave either. That silence was its own permission. Her phone buzzed on the table between us. She didn't reach for it. The screen lit up with a name, one I didn't know, and then went dark again. Her shoulders tensed, though she kept her face carefully blank. I almost asked. I almost didn't. But then she spoke. "It's easier when I don't look at it." Her voice was low, deliberate. "Because if I do, I start remembering." I didn't know what she meant, but I stayed quiet, giving her space. She glanced at me, like she was measuring whether I could carry what she was about to unload. And then, almost abruptly, she reached into a drawer under the coffee table, pulled out a thin envelope, worn at the edges. She didn't open it, just held it, turning it over in her hands like a habit. "This," she said, her voice catching, "was the last thing he ever sent me. A letter. Before the accident." The air shifted. My chest tightened. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't need to. Her eyes were locked on the envelope. I read it once. Couldn't go through it again. But I also couldn't throw it away. It's just here. Always here. She set it down between us, as though it might burn a hole through the wood. I felt the weight of her grief without her spelling it out. The way she sat straighter than usual, like if she bent even slightly she'd collapse. "You remind me of him sometimes," she said suddenly. The words landed like a quiet blow. My breath stalled. "Not in how you look," she went on quickly, shaking her head, "but in the way you notice things, how you listen, even when I'm not saying much." Her lips curved into something fragile, almost a smile. He was like that. He made me feel seen. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I wanted to reach for hers, but the timing felt sacred, untouchable. Instead, I asked softly, "And now?" Her gaze flicked to me, steady, unblinking. "Now I don't know if I'm remembering him, or starting to see you." The silence that followed was unbearable, not because it was empty but because it was too full, of her confession, of my restrained heartbeat, of a shift I couldn't undo. Neither of us moved. But in that suspended moment, I realized the ground between us had changed. Whatever lines we'd been pretending existed, they were gone. The envelope still sat between us, neither touched nor ignored, but heavy with its own unspoken gravity. She hadn't said anything else. Neither had I. But the words were already alive in the room, rippling through the silence, reshaping everything we thought we were keeping under control. For the first time that night, I leaned back. My body felt restless, like my skin was too tight. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stand and walk out, or sink closer and never leave. She must have sensed the conflict, because her eyes softened, almost apologetic. "You don't have to stay," she said. But the way she said it, it wasn't dismissal. It was fear. The quiet kind, the kind you barely admit even to yourself. I swallowed hard, shaking my head. "I know." We let that linger. The rain outside tapped against the glass like it wanted in on our conversation. My gaze dropped to the envelope again, then to her hand resting against her knee. Her fingers were slightly curled, tense, as if they'd been bracing for too long. I didn't think about it, I just moved. Slowly, carefully, I let my hand brush against hers. Not holding, not claiming, just contact, skin to skin. Her breath caught almost too quietly to hear, but I felt the shift all the same. She didn't pull away. She didn't grip tighter either. She just let me be there. "I haven't let anyone close," she whispered. "Not since him." Felt impossible. I turned my head toward her, my voice low. "I'm not him." Her eyes flicked up to mine, steady and wounded and alive all at once. "I know. That's why it scares me more." The honesty of it cracked something in me, because I understood. This wasn't about filling a space left empty. It wasn't about pretending. It was about standing at the edge of something neither of us had planned, and deciding whether we dared to lean in. We didn't move for a long time, just sat there, our hands barely touching, our silence saying everything words couldn't. And then, finally, she let her head tip, ever so slightly, until it rested against my shoulder. A fragile surrender. I didn't breathe for a moment, afraid even air might break it. Then, gently, I tilted my head until my temple brushed hers. Not a kiss, not a claim, just presence. The kind that said, "I see you. I'm here. No more pretending." Her hand shifted then, the smallest movement, her fingers threading with mine like she'd made her decision without ever needing to say it out loud. We sat there until the rain faded, the world outside resuming its steady hum. No confessions, no promises, just the quiet collapse into something we both knew was real. And for the first time, it didn't feel impossible anymore. Looking back now, it almost feels unreal how quietly it all began. No fireworks, no cinematic kiss in the rain. Just two people who, for a long time, thought they were too broken, too cautious, too late. And yet, somehow, we found ourselves side by side, not by accident but by a kind of slow inevitability. I used to think love had to announce itself loudly, through grand gestures, bold words, sweeping moments that left no room for doubt. But what I learned with her is that sometimes the most profound kind of love doesn't arrive with noise. It slips in softly, almost unnoticed, until one day you realize it's been there all along, steady and patient. For her, love had always been tangled up with loss. Every memory of closeness came with the echo of someone who wasn't there anymore. And yet, in time, she discovered she could let someone new stand beside her. Not to erase the past, but to carry it with her. With me. For me, love had always felt like something you had to earn, to prove yourself worthy of. But sitting with her, I realized it wasn't about proving anything. It was about presence, about listening, about letting silence be enough. And that realization changed me in ways I can't fully explain. We didn't have some sudden declaration that night. No life-altering decision. What we had was a simple shift. Two hands that didn't let go. A head that found rest against a shoulder. A silence that didn't feel empty anymore. That was it. And yet, that was everything. I think the most powerful lesson I took from all of this is that love isn't about timing, or perfection, or even certainty. It's about courage, the courage to risk being seen, the courage to stay when walking away would be easier, the courage to open your hand and hope someone reaches back. And she did. So here I am, years later, not telling a story about dramatic beginnings or fairy tale endings, but about the space in between. the space where real love is built. Quietly, patiently, honestly, because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about what makes your heart race. They're about what finally makes it rest. If the story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this? 58.